When you buy an old house, you expect a few surprises. Creaky floorboards, drafty windows, maybe a loose shingle or two. What you don't expect is to find a secret room hidden behind a wall, a room that shouldn't exist, filled with things that defy explanation. But that's exactly what happened to me. And I still can't shake the feeling that I was never meant to find it. It started innocently enough. I'd just moved into a century-old Victorian on the edge of town, a place I'd bought for a steal after the previous owner passed away. The house had character: ornate woodwork, stained glass windows, and a sprawling attic that looked like something out of a Gothic novel. I spent my first few weeks cleaning, painting, and getting used to the strange noises that came with living in a house older than my grandparents. The neighbors told me stories about the place, how it had stood empty for years, how people said it was haunted, how no one ever stayed for long. I laughed it off, chalking it up to small-town gossip. One rainy Saturday, I decided to tackle the attic. The space was cluttered with boxes, old furniture, and trunks filled with yellowed newspapers and forgotten clothes. As I was moving a heavy wardrobe away from the far wall, I noticed something odd, a faint outline, almost like a door, hidden beneath layers of peeling wallpaper. My heart started to race. I ran my fingers along the edge, feeling for a seam, and sure enough, there was a narrow gap where the wall met the floor. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed a utility knife and started peeling away the wallpaper, revealing a small wooden door, no more than 4 feet high. The handle was old and tarnished, but it turned easily in my hand. I hesitated for a moment, every horror movie I'd ever seen flashing through my mind, but I couldn't stop myself. I pulled the door open and a rush of cold, stale air hit me in the face. Inside was a narrow staircase, steep and winding, leading down into darkness. I grabbed a flashlight and started down, each step creaking beneath my weight. The air grew colder with every step, and the smell, musty, earthy, with a hint of something sweet and rotten, grew stronger. At the bottom, I found myself in a small, windowless room. The walls were lined with shelves, each one filled with objects that looked like they belonged in a museum or a nightmare. There were jars filled with cloudy liquid, each containing something unidentifiable. Old dolls with cracked porcelain faces stared at me from the shadows. In the center of the room was a table, and on it a stack of faded photographs and a journal bound in cracked leather. I stood there for a long moment, flashlight trembling in my hand, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The air felt thick, almost electric, as if the room itself was holding its breath. I stepped closer to the table, drawn by the journal and the photographs. The pictures were old, black and white, their edges curled and yellowed with age. Most showed people I didn't recognize: stern-faced men in suits, women in long dresses, children with wide, haunted eyes. But as I flipped through the stack, I felt a chill run down my spine. Some of the photos were taken in this very house. I recognized the wallpaper, the staircase, even the stained glass window in the front hall. In one, a little girl stood in the attic right where I'd found the hidden door. She was staring straight at the camera, her expression unreadable. I set the photos aside and picked up the journal. The cover was brittle, the pages inside filled with cramped, spidery handwriting. The entries dated back nearly 100 years. At first, they were mundane: notes about the weather, repairs to the house, visitors from out of town. But as I read on, the tone changed. The writer, someone named Margaret, began to describe strange occurrences. Footsteps in the attic, voices whispering at night, objects moving on their own. She wrote about dreams that felt too real, about waking up to find muddy footprints on the floor, about the feeling that she was being watched. One entry caught my eye. It was dated October 12th, 1923. "I found the door again," Margaret wrote. "I thought I'd imagined it, but it's real. The room is colder every time I go down. The things on the shelves, I don't remember putting them there. Sometimes I hear someone calling my name from the darkness. I'm afraid to go back, but I can't stay away." I shivered, glancing around the room. The shelves were covered in dust, but the objects looked as if they'd been placed there recently. I reached for one of the jars, holding it up to the light. Inside was something that looked like a small animal, twisted and deformed, its features blurred by the murky liquid. I set it down quickly, my stomach turning. I wanted to leave, to run back up the stairs and seal the door behind me, but something kept me there. I felt compelled to keep searching, to find out what else was hidden in this forgotten room. I moved to the far wall where a large, ornate mirror hung between two shelves. The glass was cloudy, the frame carved with strange symbols I didn't recognize. As I wiped away the dust, my reflection stared back at me, pale, wide-eyed, and afraid. I leaned in closer to the mirror, trying to make out the symbols carved into the frame. They looked almost like letters, but not from any language I knew. Twisting, looping shapes that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. My breath fogged the glass, and for a moment I thought I saw movement behind me in the reflection. I spun around, heart pounding, but the room was empty except for the shelves and the table. Still, the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. I turned back to the mirror, and that's when I noticed something else. In the lower corner of the glass, almost hidden by grime, was a handprint. It was small, like a child's, and pressed so hard against the glass that I could see every line and swirl. I reached out, hesitating, then touched my fingers to the print. The glass was ice cold, sending a jolt up my arm. I jerked my hand back, suddenly desperate to get out of the room. But as I turned to leave, my flashlight flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, using its weak light to find the stairs. The air felt even colder now, and I could hear a faint whispering, so soft I couldn't make out the words. It sounded like it was coming from the walls themselves, or maybe from the shelves lined with jars and dolls. I hurried up the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the narrow passage, and slammed the hidden door shut behind me. I stood in the attic, gasping for breath, my heart racing. The house was silent, but the sense of unease lingered. I locked the attic door and went downstairs, trying to convince myself that I'd just let my imagination get the better of me. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the journal, the photographs, the strange objects on the shelves. I dreamed of the little girl in the photo standing in the attic, her eyes fixed on mine. The next morning I tried to go about my day as usual, but the memory of the hidden room haunted me. I kept glancing at the ceiling, half expecting to hear footsteps above me. I thought about calling someone, maybe a friend, maybe the police. But what would I even say? That I'd found a secret room filled with jars and old dolls? that I'd seen a handprint in a mirror and heard whispers in the dark. I knew how it would sound. Still, I couldn't stay away. That evening, as the sun set and the house grew quiet, I found myself drawn back to the attic. I unlocked the door, flashlight in hand, and opened the hidden door once more. The air was colder than before, and the shadows seemed to move as I stepped inside. This time, I moved more slowly, my nerves raw and every sense on high alert. The room felt different, as if it had been waiting for me. The mirror on the wall seemed to shimmer in the dim light, and the shelves looked even more crowded than before, though I couldn't say what had changed. I tried not to look too closely at the jars or the dolls, focusing instead on the journal. I flipped through the pages, searching for answers, for some explanation of what this place was and why it existed. Margaret's entries grew more frantic as the days went on. She wrote about hearing voices at night, about seeing figures in the mirror that weren't her own. She described dreams of being trapped in the hidden room, unable to find the stairs, the walls closing in around her. In one entry she wrote, "I think the room is alive. It remembers everyone who's ever been here. Sometimes I see their faces in the glass. Sometimes I hear them calling my name." I shivered, glancing at the mirror. My own reflection looked pale and distorted, the edges of my face blurring into the shadows. I tried to look away, but something about the glass held my gaze. For a moment I thought I saw another face behind mine. A woman's face, eyes wide with fear, mouth open in a silent scream. I blinked, and it was gone. I forced myself to keep reading. The last entry in the journal was dated November 2nd, 1923. "I can't leave," Margaret wrote. "The door won't open. The voices are louder now. They want me to stay. If anyone finds this, please, don't listen to them. Don't look in the mirror. Don't answer when they call your name." A chill ran through me. I set the journal down and backed away from the table, my eyes fixed on the mirror. The whispering started again, louder this time, echoing off the walls. I could almost make out words, my name repeated over and over, mingled with other voices, pleading, warning, begging me to leave. I stumbled toward the stairs, desperate to get out. As I reached the door, I felt a cold hand brush against my arm. I spun around, but there was no one there, just the dolls on the shelves, their glass eyes watching me. I bolted up the stairs, slamming the hidden door behind me and pushing the wardrobe back into place. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the mirror, the handprint, the faces in the glass. I knew I'd found something in that room that shouldn't exist, something that was never meant to be disturbed. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and exhaustion. I tried to avoid the attic, but the thought of that hidden room gnawed at me. I kept hearing faint noises from above, soft thumps, the creak of floorboards, the occasional whisper that seemed to drift down the stairs. I told myself it was just the house settling, or maybe my imagination running wild. But deep down, I knew better. The room was still there, waiting, and whatever I'd awakened wasn't going to let me forget it. I started researching the house's history, digging through old records at the library and talking to neighbors who'd lived in the area for decades. Most people didn't know much or claimed not to, but one elderly woman remembered Margaret. She said Margaret had been troubled, that she'd become reclusive in her final years, rarely leaving the house. Some whispered that she'd gone mad, others that she'd simply vanished one winter, leaving the house empty until it was sold off to strangers. No one mentioned a hidden room, but the way the woman looked at me, nervous, almost fearful, told me she knew more than she was willing to say. I thought about sealing the door, pretending I'd never found it. But every night the dreams returned. Margaret's face in the mirror, the cold hand on my arm, the voices calling my name. I started to wonder if the room was some kind of trap, a place that fed on fear and curiosity, drawing people in and refusing to let them go. The more I tried to ignore it, the stronger the pull became. One evening, unable to resist any longer, I went back to the attic. I moved the wardrobe aside and opened the hidden door, half expecting to find the room empty, the shelves bare, the mirror cracked and useless. But everything was just as I'd left it. The air was colder than ever, and the whispering started the moment I stepped inside. This time, I didn't look in the mirror. I kept my eyes on the floor, moving quickly to the table. I picked up the journal, flipping to the last page, searching for something I'd missed. There, scrawled in shaky handwriting beneath Margaret's final entry, was a message I hadn't seen before. If you find this room, leave it as you found it. Do not take anything. Do not stay after dark. And whatever you do not answer when they call your name. I felt a surge of panic. I backed out of the room, slamming the door and pushing the wardrobe back into place. I locked the attic and went downstairs, heart pounding. I knew then that some secrets are better left buried and some rooms are meant to stay hidden. I tried to return to normal life, but nothing felt the same. The house was colder, the shadows longer, and every sound seemed to echo with a warning. I avoided the attic, but the memory of that hidden room haunted me. Sometimes late at night I'd hear faint footsteps above my bedroom, or the soft scrape of something moving across the floor. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Margaret was still up there, or if something else had taken her place. I thought about moving, about leaving the house behind and starting over somewhere new. But every time I packed a box or made a plan, something would happen. A door would slam on its own, a light would flicker, or I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye. It was as if the house itself didn't want me to leave, as if the secret I'd uncovered had bound me to it in some way. One night, as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard my name whispered from the darkness. It was so clear, so close that I sat up in bed, heart racing. The whisper came again, this time from the hallway outside my door. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, creeping toward the sound. The house was silent, the air heavy with anticipation. I stood at the bottom of the attic stairs, listening, my breath shallow and quick. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then from behind the attic door, I heard a soft tapping, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I backed away, fear flooding through me, and locked myself in my room. I didn't sleep at all that night, and when morning finally came, I made a decision. I called a contractor and had the attic entrance sealed, the wardrobe bolted to the floor, the hidden door covered with new drywall and paint. I wanted to erase the room from existence, to pretend it had never been there at all. But some things can't be undone. Even now, months later, I still feel the weight of that secret room pressing down on me. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and the wind rattles the windows, I think I hear whispers coming from behind the walls. I try to ignore them, to convince myself it's just my imagination. But deep down, I know the truth. If you ever find a hidden room in your house, think twice before opening the door. Some secrets are meant to stay buried, and some rooms should never be found. Because what's inside might not just change your life, it might never let you go.